Welcome everyone to the Negotiating with Confidence panel. I'm so excited to be here and to be your moderator today. I'm even more excited to bring this wonderful panel to the stage, so if you give me a moment, I will bring them all up individually. First, we're going to be joined by Gail Guest-Brown, who is the CEO of Equity Leadership Strategist of Guest-Brown Impact. Next, we're going to be joined by Candace Nash. Candace is a diversity and inclusion leader at Toyota Motor North America. Last but not least, we are joined by Melanie Shook. Melanie is the Vice President for Small Business Service at ADP. Woo. You all clearly brought reinforcements. Well, listen, we're so excited to start off this conversation, and I'm the daughter of a preacher and a teacher, so I have to start off by telling yourself to look at your neighbor and let them know, good job, you made a good choice choosing this session. Now you have to look at your other neighbor, the one who you like second best, the one you did not pick the first time. And because this is a negotiation conversation, I want you to make a deal with them. And the deal I want you to make is to be open during this conversation, to be intentional about challenging yourself to learn new things, and to be bold in assessing how you are going to show up after all of the wonderful things this panel is going to share. So without further ado, we are going to get started. I am so excited for you to learn more about everyone on this stage. This group of women is incredibly multifaceted, incredibly accomplished, and I'm going to share a little bit more about each of them, but I'm also going to invite them to explain more about themselves as I ask and delve into the questions. First, I'd like to introduce myself as well. I'm the founder of the Executive Women's Retreat, where we work with women who understand that their power and their voice can extend beyond the four walls of their organization. So they're women in corporate who are right on the cusp of calling, who understand that they want to use their voice in a way that they're in-demand thought leaders. So I'm so honored to work with them. I'm even more honored to lay way for this wonderful conversation to take place. And so what I would love to do is understanding the different areas that we all come from. Understanding that we're in environments where we have to show up as our peak selves, always performing, always overachieving, and really externally not seeming as if there's any issue with our confidence. Mm-hmm. However, I also know that sometimes there's a double reality that happens, where even though at work we can't always show those cracks, behind the scenes, we understand that sometimes there are things that can erode or disrupt what we believe and what we feel about ourselves. So Candace, I actually want to start with you, and I want to hold space for anyone who might be dealing with some hidden wounds. Understanding that you might show up and have to put face on and be the best person and be everyone's answers, but can you talk about the different factors that can actually disrupt confidence within ourselves, and how do you really overcome that discomfort in getting back to yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I want to start out by saying I'm honored and I feel very privileged to be on this stage with such empowering and just esteemed panelists and a moderator. So I'd like to say thank you. I'd also like to thank BE and my team at Toyota, Alva Mason and team TELUS. I thank you for this opportunity. So thank you for joining me and the support and encouragement and everyone in the room. So I want to start out with a quote. I feel like a lot of the sessions I went through today and you know, they've started out with quotes. I love quotes. So I want to start out answering this question with a quote. And it says that the way to develop self-confidence is to do the thing you fear and to get a record of successful experiences behind you. So if you think about the sessions we've been through, even the legacy where they all talked about what they were afraid of and facing their fears, right? And so that quote really resonated with me as I thought about this answer, because sometimes we just have to push ourselves. How do we get out of the way of those disruptions? I think it's a few things, and if I can be honest with my sisters in the room today, can I be honest with you? I think some of the disruptions that we have that shake our fear are things like distractions of social media, comparing ourselves. This person's done this, I didn't do this. And I think sometimes we need to really be honest and quiet those fears, right? And just sometimes it's a matter of really limiting the distractions, being intentional. And we've also talked a lot about this concept of women of power. We are at a Women of Power conference, and we are powerful women, and we don't all have the answers. So finding that confidence means, you know what, I saw you do it well, I wanna learn from you. I saw you negotiate well, you know what, I'm gonna be vulnerable and say, how did you do that? And I wanna learn from you. So sometimes it's limiting those distractions, finding those people that do it well and learning from them. That's what this conference is all about. And I wanna submit that even when we're done in another, 48 hours or so, make sure that all these connections that you have, you are continuing to resonate and to speak to folks, because we're gonna learn from each other even once this conference is over.
Thank you so much for that. And I love the fact that you really listed out different things that we need to look out for that might erode or disrupt. I want to go even further in understanding that there are also things that are external from us that can also continue to erode. So Melanie, could you comment on what is needed to really get your mindset back to a space where you can see yourself in the full confidence and the full competency of what you know you are able to deliver, and quite frankly, what you can command?
I'm happy to do that. First off, I too am just super honored, and it's a pleasure and joy to be on the panel with these ladies and also be representing my ADP family. So thank you so much. When I think about mindset, right, so I often read a lot, and so there's a author by the name of Jim Quick, which talks about the limitless model. That's one I like to apply to my daily life and my daily work. And I think about this model that talks about mindset, motivation, and methods. And so mindset for me is really rooted in terms of some of our values and some of our beliefs. So when I think about the belief systems that we have all come to develop over time, there's different channels that have helped develop that, from family structures to the society that we live in, to the experiences that we have the opportunity to explore. And really, when it comes to the mindset, it's like, how do you open that up and really take in more things that help shape your thinking, and so that you can develop a level of confidence by exposure. And so the mindset for me is so critical, because it plays into the motivation, which goes into, you know, overall, what's your purpose, right? Simon Sinek talks a lot about your why. And so if you understand your why you're here, that's a great way to help you get to motivation. And so when you think about your purpose, there's energy that you have to apply to that. And then as you take those small, simple steps, you can then get into greater things. So the combination for me around mindset is opening that up, thinking about my why am I here, what am I here to do, and then what's the method, what are the things that I'm gonna actually put in play in order to achieve the things that I'm striving to achieve. So for me, when I think about this whole equation, and confidence, it really is rooted in those three principles, and it helps you to think and explore in a different capacity because you're open to those three elements. So mindset to me is super key, and it's at the top of the list for really unpacking the power that we each have. And it starts with examining your vulnerabilities in that area, and how can then you widen your perspective to let other things in.
Thank you, Melanie, for that. And I really appreciate you bringing up the aspect of belief and purpose, because a lot of times, especially as we get into the longevity of our careers, as we continue to ascend up the corporate ladders, we begin to identify at times with our positions, with the roles, with the titles that we're called. But understanding purpose is something different. Purpose comes to you regardless of your title, regardless of your organization. And so thank you so much for bringing that out, because what you believe that you are purposed to do is definitely going to determine the decisions that you make going forward. And so I really want to also rope in Gail in talking about equity, because she's our queen of equity up here.
All right.
We know that in the industry that we're in, I believe the latest statistics cited that Black women make 63.7 cents to every dollar of non-white male Hispanics, or non-Hispanic white males. Yes. And so clearly there is a gap. Yes. Clearly there is something happening. And of course, there are external factors that we can't always control. But can you talk about the things that we can control in terms of how do we know if we're messing up? How do we position ourselves in the best space? And what do we need to know about what's going on in those negotiation rooms? What have you found are common mistakes that people are making?
Awesome, thank you for that question. First of all, I just want to know, are you ready to get comfortable with the N-word? Not that N-word, I'm talking about negotiations, right? All right, so are we? Okay, I am Gail Guest-Brown, Equity Leadership Strategist, Executive Leadership Coach, and CEO of Guest-Brown Impact, an award-winning leadership development firm where I work with women of color to overcome challenges to equity in the workplace, and I also work with companies to overcome their challenges to equity. It's also my privilege to be here. Just like many of you, in my early career, I struggled to get paid on par with my white male colleagues. That was a struggle. But with the help of grace of God and a confidant and a coach, I learned how to overcome those challenges. And it is possible, right? And it requires us to step out. But I want to tell you that I took what I learned and I created two negotiation offers. One is called Brand Your Brilliance and Negotiate. Yes, branding is part of negotiation, right? Brand Your Brilliance and Negotiate Intensive, and also Command Your Worth Blueprint. And with those offers, I've helped sisters achieve double-digit raises and a couple of promotions in just a year's time, right? The highest one was 67% raise in 1 year. Amen? So there is a way to do this, but we have to learn how to communicate. So now, are you ready to get cozy with the N-word? Yes. Okay, all right, let's talk then. And so a couple of things. Branding is how you show up matters, right? We can't show up in our flip-flops and a T-shirt and all that stuff. We have to show up correct, right? What your brand says a lot about who you are, but also we have to be willing to make the ask. And 60% of women would have never, ever negotiated at work. And yet 80% of them said they would leave their job tomorrow for a raise, okay? And I think it's just that we haven't built that muscle. We don't know how to frame that conversation. And I want to reframe it from negotiations to a conversation. We have to have a conversation about our value in the workplace. How do we articulate our value into what you bring to the company? That's important, right? So branding, articulating your value to the workplace, and just getting comfortable. Negotiation mastery, having that conversation takes practice, right? We don't become good at anything our first time out, but it doesn't stop us from getting out there, right? We still have to get out there. And with the help of a confidant or a coach, you too can negotiate successfully.
Thank you so much for that. And I love the fact that you talked about practicing your way into it, it being a muscle that you need to flex.
Yeah.
I remember as I was negotiating a salary, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was to ask for what you want and don't back down. I distinctly remember this because I was about to go into a meeting where I was working at an organization and I knew they wanted me. And a woman pulled me to the side and said, "They're going to lowball you. I want you to know, ask for what you want and don't back down." And so from that one piece of advice, I was able to double my salary by 50% in one conversation. And I was already making 6 figures.
I will say this, that many women never negotiate that first offer. You're brand new to the company. You're going in. That is the strongest position you will ever be in terms of a negotiation. First of all, they've chosen you. They decided you're the one out of all of these people, this is the time to negotiate. You're in a very powerful position, right? But we say, oh yes, when do I start? No, this is the time where you say, thank you, I love that offer. Let me take that undercut advisement. Do you mind if I get back to you tomorrow? And then you go back home, you come up with your writing. You can either counter in writing or call them back the next day, but you're definitely not accepting that first offer. There's always more money behind the first offer. Amen? Amen.
Absolutely. And so I want us all to actually share some additional strategies. What were those pieces that did it for you in terms of allowing you to see those results or allowing you to help others to see those results in terms of strategies that you implemented to either negotiate your salary, negotiate things outside of your salary? What are those strategies that you can quote like the back of your hand that you know works? We'll start with Melanie.
Okay. For me, you know, you have great wisdom there. So you're absolutely right. I think it's very important for you to know your worth. So, you know, a lot of that goes into, you know, understand the tools in your toolkit and how much that is worth. So one of the things I do is I stay marketable, understanding what's in the marketplace for the skill sets that I have to offer. Not that I'm trying to leave a company, but just trying to understand my worth and my value at any particular time. So I know earlier, Melody and everybody's been talking about the value of research and how important it is to make sure that you have the knowledge and the information about your assets that's important to you. Yes. So where your experience lends credibility, how much is that worth, and how much value do you place on that, and how much value does the market place on that, so that you can have clarity. So I think research is super important. The other strategy that I use is the power of pause. So one of the things that I learned in negotiation when I was going in for a role, and I had met with the CEO, and we had a 30-minute lunch slot scheduled. And her executive admin brought in our lunch, and we were having a conversation. She came in, and she said, I got 30 minutes. I said, absolutely, let's get to it. And we had a conversation. An hour and a half later, she left the room. And she said to me on the way out, be gentle to us in your negotiation. And I said to her, I'm going to be worth every penny, and I will deliver against it.
Right now.
So that she had clarity, and I had clarity, that we were going to have a meeting of the minds. And that was a super courageous move for me, because at that point in my career, I wasn't as confident in my worth and how much value I was bringing to the organization. The third thing I would offer is to understand who you're talking to. And so there's this system called brain codes. It's CODE, and it stands for the basic animals out there that every brain is kind of wrapped around. It's a little bit of Myers-Briggs combined with this new methodology that Jim Quick uses. So it's kind of a cheetah, owl, dolphin, or he is elephant, and that's what I am. And it really talks about how that individual likes to receive information, how they operate, what they value, and the way that they communicate. And so understanding who you're talking to. So I'm an elephant, as I mentioned, and I value collaboration and teamwork. And so going in, talking to a cheetah who's in and out, they have quick sound bites, quick attention span, and I'm going through, the team and all this stuff, I'm not really connecting or having a meeting of the minds in terms of what I'm trying to represent in my value and what they are hearing. And so I think it's super important for you to understand exactly who you're talking to and how they receive information and what they value around the information that you're trying to share, so that you can have the best opportunity to connect and have meeting of the minds.
And Melly, if I could ask a follow-up question, I know you talked about the value of research and making sure you were prepared going into the spaces. Obviously, when we are negotiating so many things and we're in complex environments, sometimes it's difficult to map out who is actually the decision maker, who's actually pulling the strings to say yes or no to what we want. Oftentimes, what we find in our conversations and our negotiations, that sometimes you're talking to someone who's auxiliary or adjacent to where the decision is being made. So could you also give a little bit more depth of strategy into how do you figure out who the actual decision maker is?
I think that comes through, it depends. There's different types of negotiation, right? So you're talking about transactional negotiations, which is I'm going to go purchase a car, or yeah, a house or something that's just a one in and out transaction, right? So that's going to be a little different strategy than when you're talking more relationship-based negotiations. So your boss or a leader that you work with, et cetera. I think it's important for you to understand who's actually the person that is either sponsoring or making the ultimate decision, right? So there are the natural levels of the chain of command, but then there's also people behind the scenes who have influence on the decision as well. So not oftentimes is a decision just a one and done person or one-to-one contact. You have to look at the whole ecosystem and do like a political map. I learned this a while ago, where you take a political map and you say, who are all the parties that have any type of influence on this decision or this work output that I'm working on? And then you have to have an honest assessment with yourself to say, where do they stand? Are they a supporter? Are they a detractor? Are they an adversary? And then you really just work that political map to understand that if a decision maker is an adversary, you've got to work really hard to get them on board, or at least neutral, so that you can have a level playing field when it comes to what you're going after, whether it's in your personal negotiation or some strategy that you're trying to deploy for the business. So I think it's super important to plot that out and really think through in depth, have conversations with other people to truly understand where they stand in the circle of influence versus the circle of decision making. So for me, that has been a really key item that I try to keep in my arsenal and keep very active, because you will hear things that, people will give you clues if you listen and try to understand where a person is coming from, kind of the meeting before the meeting. You don't want to go into the conversation blind. You want to have a level of understanding of where you're standing before you walk into the conversation. But that takes a bit of courage and openness and willingness to have those conversations outside of the room, so that when you come in to actually go in for the critical conversation, you're armed and prepared with where people stand before you walk in the room. So there's a myriad of things that you can do, but it's all rooted in relationships and truly understanding where each person sits in the lens of the decision-making process.
Thank you for that, Melanie. Candace, I want to also ask you about your strategies. And I know you're coming from a unique perspective where you're a D&I leader, but also you're an executive in residence for a major university. So can you talk about what you have seen on multiple spectrums, from both influencing strategies in a negotiation within your role, but also in your role with university students and as a mentor?
Absolutely. So, I would build on what's already been said in a lot of ways, but I have really a kind of a four-pronged approach. I was also happy throughout last night's dinner and also this morning to hear about the power of prayer and really kind of centering in. So no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm doing work at Toyota or I'm doing work at my university, I'm really thoughtful about really centering myself to understand, okay, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? So prayer, my first approach really starts with prayer, and it's a 4P approach. The second is planning and preparing, right? And you talked a lot about doing your homework and understanding how I'm gonna negotiate and how I'm gonna work this playing field. So it's about planning and preparing. But in that planning and preparing, I think it's also really important that we're intentional about understanding where we are going to compromise and what are our non-negotiables. And we really need to be thoughtful about that. I thought about, as I was preparing for this question, I thought about a situation many years ago, well before my time at Toyota, where I was actually interviewing and it was getting to the point of negotiating salary. I remember walking through, if you'll just indulge me in this story for a second, I didn't see anybody that looked like me, not one person, not one female or one person of color. And the job was going to have me in rural, let me back up for a second. I'm from New Jersey, all right? Let's start there. This job was gonna have me in rural parts of Alabama
Ooh. Ooh.
And all I could think about was, okay, I don't see anyone that looks like me in this interview process, and then you're gonna have me 2 and 3 hours in these rural parts. This was like 25 years ago. And so I remember, again, I was very young in my career, but I thought about, I need to say something now or I might regret this later. So we were not even at lunch, right? In the final round of interviewing and about to negotiate salary. And I just asked the question because in my mind, I was like, this is a non-negotiable. So I just very simply, 25 years ago said, what is your diversity strategy? And how do you plan to sustain, I'm just a little concerned, I don't see anyone that looks like me. And they said, well, this is it. This is what you... And in that moment, I was excited about the opportunity, I really was, but I was very concerned about what was ahead of me. And before we got to lunch, I really said, this is, in my head, this is a non-negotiable, and I said, thank you so much for this interview opportunity. We had been through about 4 or 5 rounds at that point. I pulled myself out. And I think what I share that story to say, sometimes we have to be courageous in terms of knowing what are our non-negotiables. And I later wound up going to another company and having so many opportunities. The things that I thought I'd have at this one job where I was going to be concerned about going to different parts of the country by myself. But again, I was true to myself. And I think that's really important when you're negotiating, is you need to be true to yourself and you need to know what are the things you'll compromise and what are the things that are non-negotiable. And then I would kind of sum it all up by saying, you mentioned this, Gail, about practicing. Practice, I say practice makes permanent. So just like we do mock interviews, it's really important to find that community that you're comfortable with. I think we heard Judy talk about it. We heard Melody talk about it. We've heard all of the leaders that we've seen talk about finding that tribe of sisters, brothers, people who look like you, people who don't look like you, that are going to be very honest with you. And you can say, hey, I need to practice this thing. I'm not going to go in here blindly and do this because we need to sharpen that muscle. So identify the people in your circle that you can, first of all, you're going to pray. You're going to plan and prepare, but you're going to practice. We don't do anything without practicing, and negotiation is no different.
I love that. Thank you.
Gail, would you share some of the strategies that you have found most effective as well? And can you also talk about what are the things outside of our salaries that we need to keep in mind in terms of negotiation?
That's a good one. Don't let me forget that. Okay. So the other strategies, I think all of so much wisdom have been shared already. Other things that happen is, like, I mentioned that I had a colleague, a coach, and a confidant, right? I think so much learning can happen in the collective. And so often when I put together offers, it's a cohort of women going through, because no one person has all the answers anymore, and we can learn a lot from each other. So even if you don't have a coach or a confidant, maybe you have a group of ladies at work that you can partner up with to kind of back each other up and practice with each other. I mean, practice is so good. You mentioned knowing what you wanted out of that negotiation, because you're not going to get everything. Negotiation is back and forth, and honoring the relational part. I love that you brought that up, because this is a long-term relationship, so you want to make sure it's a win-win, right? You're not trying to just gut the person, right, and get everything you want. So understanding what is the company's policy about? How often will they give raises? Do your research. What is my pay band? Can you share that with me? Do a little bit of research in advance about what their policies are about pay advances. But also be willing to talk to your peers, see what they're willing to discuss in terms of what they're getting paid. So do your reconnaissance, right? So get prepared. So preparing for the negotiation. Come with a list of all of your accomplishments, what values you've created for the company over time, right? So don't just go in there saying, well, I've done a good job, and so you should just give me be willing to prepare to demonstrate what you've done, the value you've brought to the company. So get in there, get your talking points together. So that's a very good strategy. Some of the other things is know that you're not going to get everything you want. So when we don't get anything we want to think about our best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What if they say no? You know, hear that no and say, okay, that means no right now, right? It doesn't mean no forever, right? And then some of the other things you can negotiate for, I wanted to give you a little bit of a list because I didn't want to leave anything out. Signing bonuses. If they don't give you money, how about this job title change that I feel that better exemplifies what I bring to the company? Or how about a promotion, an advancement? Let's talk about when would I be eligible for a career move, right? Can I move laterally? You might want to negotiate for perks or professional development funds, like, did you pay for yourself to come here, or did the company pay for it? Those are professional development funds, right? Certifications cost big money, right? Maybe they can pay for that. Maybe they can do tuition reimbursement, commuting benefits. These are all things that you can negotiate for, right? It's not always monetary. And when you're negotiating your salary, remember to include everything when you're comparing yourself to external companies. Your entire compensation package, which includes your benefits and how they measure up. Another important thing is to do your research on what your job is commanding in the marketplace. You do all of that, and that will give you confidence. And then you practice, and then you are ready, right? That preparation and research will make you, embolden you to be able to advocate for yourself. And that's all you're doing. You're advocating. You're not even negotiating. You're advocating for yourself, demonstrating your value, articulating it with your words. And we just need to get better about that. We just need to build that muscle. We can do this.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And it sounded like something all three of you mentioned at some point during your responses was the notion that you have to know what you want. Yes. I want to make sure that we pull that out and understand its importance, because it's something that can sound simple, but a lot of times in our careers, can you actually say that you've stopped to assess what you actually want? A lot of times we know what we're good at, we know what the next title is, we know what the next promotion is, but have you stopped to ask, is this what I want for me? Is this where I feel called? Is this where I'm supposed to be positioned? And many times we feel that we start dismissing these notions because when we start asking these questions and coming up with blanks or not exactly knowing what could fill in that gap, we get a little scared. And so I love the fact that you each really talked about pulling out and defining ahead of time, before you get in the room, what is it that you want? I would also offer, I know our organization works so many times with women who are asking for the first time, what can I get outside of my organization? How can I use my corporate story? How can I use my career and pivot to become either a speaker or author, someone who can close 6- or 7-figure deals? And so a lot of times when we're new to these conversations, we just don't know what we want. We're not exactly sure how to put framework to it. So can you also just quickly talk about, and I'll start with you, Melanie, can you quickly talk about some things that you do in addition to figuring out what you can command? How do you really do that self-reflection and self-assessment to say, do I actually want this?
Yeah, I think, time gives you more clarity. So I know earlier in my career, I was very monetarily focused. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was very revelational earlier when, if you would have said, what do you want to be 20, 25 years from now, I would have shot super short of the goal line because I just couldn't see the possibility that has evolved over time. But originally, it was very monetarily. As I've grown in myself and learned what's important to me, it's more anchored around my value system. So in addition to the compensation components, I look at my passion around serving in the community and on nonprofit boards and all of those things. And so I think about where my company's values align with my personal values and how can then I make a better connection through those intersection points. And so I'm really blessed to work for a company who values community service as well. And so that's very important to me. So that's a component that is a priority when I'm looking at what I want to negotiate. So I think about my personal priorities, and I match that up against the company's priorities, and where there's the intersection points, then it's a match. And so that's another way that I filter through to see exactly what are some of the areas or dimensions that are important to me personally.
Awesome.
Thank you, Melanie. Candace, I want to go a little bit further in talking about the relational nature as it pertains to figuring out what you want or how to negotiate as well. I want you to talk about the importance of community. Can you speak on the importance of getting feedback? I know there are some instances I remember in our business's early years, we would work with a lot of women, and they would come in and think, oh, I'm going to pitch myself for this amount, not knowing they could get 5 times that. But had they not been in community, they would never have known. Can you talk about the relational nature of negotiation?
Absolutely. So I think we started to talk a little bit about it when we were talking about the practice element. I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about is mentoring. And a lot of times people come to me and they don't really know what to talk about. They're not prepared, right? This is an area that I love to talk about in terms of how do you prepare. So I think that in terms of relationships, you should use those mentorship relationships. You should use those sponsorship relationships. You should use the women like the many women that we see in this room to really kind of, again, practice and really hear from them about what it is that I need to be doing. I think sometimes we just think about, when we're thinking about relationships, we just think about, oh, I just need this one off here or this one off there. But I think it's extremely important when we're talking about negotiating, build on the relationships, and again, practice through those different relationships, mentoring, sponsoring. I would even venture to say things like sororities, whoever you feel comfortable with, really leverage those relationships, because that's what's going to give you the practice you need.
Thank you for that, Candace. Gail, I have a question for you in relation to opposition and overcoming opposition. So obviously we have shared some amazing strategies on this stage, but we all know that perfect strategies don't always result in perfect results or things that we actually want. And you touched on this a little bit earlier. What I'd like you to talk about is how do you overcome opposition? I know there's one side of the spectrum, or I firmly believe that you should never want something so badly that you're not willing to walk away from it if you don't necessarily set the parameters. Can you talk about how do you overcome opposition in some environments that, quite frankly, might be hostile to you negotiating? There are times when we're not always in organizations, even if we have done all of the things that are ever going to promote us or ever going to give us that bonus or ever going to agree to our terms. Can you talk about how do you overcome opposition?
Opposition to even having the conversation, or opposition while you're negotiating?
While you're negotiating.
While you're negotiating. So a couple of things to keep in mind is when you're negotiating, you want to separate the negotiation from the person. So depersonalize it. This is a business conversation. It's not a you versus them, right? It's a business. So you, first of all, in your mind, your mindset matters. It's a conversation, right? You have every right to have this conversation. Don't take the person into account. Also, use positive language. The more you communicate positively, you're going to get more with honey. What was it? Honey than with vinegar, yeah. Right? And so you want to think about terms of things that you can agree with what they said. So if there's anything that they said that you can agree with, you can say, I like that point. I totally agree with you there. I like the fact that whatever you can think of that's authentically positive, I want you to affirm that, right? So that you're already agreeing with each other. You're in mode of agreement, right? So you're setting the tone. And then also, so you're in negotiations, don't let your emotions, keep your emotions out of it. Mm-hmm. Like they say something that's really crazy and you're like, don't do that. right. Like they're like, you're like, I'm gonna offer you $10 extra a month. You're like, No, but you don't let your emotions, you don't show your emotions, keep your emotions in check. You're like, that's a really interesting offer. That is an interesting offer. That is not what I was thinking, but perhaps we could revisit this at another time, right? Mm-hmm. So we can always exit when we feel like we have hit a roadblock, because this is a relationship that we're going to have to maintain after this conversation, right? So it's not, so you can always exit and revisit later, right? If we feel like we're just up against the wall, this person is crazy, I'm not going to be able to get anywhere with them, right? But also, you can say, you know, that's not what I was thinking. Let me tell you about something I achieved for this company that you may not be aware of. Maybe you're aware of it, but maybe you not know the details. I want to tell you a little bit more about my story. So persist in telling them what goodness, what values you have delivered, right? Even if they're not receptive, you want them to hear it. Even if they know a little bit, they may not know the whole thing. I want you to hear it. That's why I came to this conversation. I want you to know what I've been about, right? I don't, you know, we get divorced from the outcome, right? So we've prayed about it, we've practiced it, we've researched it, we've done our homework, we're prepared, we're confident. Now divorce yourself from the outcome. Let's just go in and have a conversation, right? Let's go in and put our best foot forward and watch for the increase. So often, we don't do all that. And we go in there, we don't get the raise, and then we get mad. I had a client they kept offering her, they kept telling her they were going to give her a raise. They were going to give her a raise, they were going to give her a promotion, and it never came, it wouldn't come. So she contacted me because she was getting frustrated. And we talked about it. We talked about what she needed out of that conversation. I said, do not let this affect the quality of work that you put out. You hang in there. You continue to put your best foot forward. You continue to put out. And eventually, this is the one I told you about. She hung in there. Within a year, she got three promotions and 3 salary increases. And in the end, her salary went up 67%, right? But it would be tempted, because it was taking them a long time, to just give up on it and say, forget it. If they're not going to promote me, they keep promising me stuff, and just give up on them, and then get mad at it and not stop producing. And so it's important to keep our emotions in check and remember that this is a business relationship, and we're always going to we're all about excellence. Come on now. Unveiling excellence. Come on. So continue to do the excellent work, and then you can make a decision if it doesn't come, whether you're going to continue to take that or not, whether you're going to move on. One of the things she said that I kept asking her, what's your point? When will you make a decision to move on, right? Because we don't ever have to stay somewhere where we're not valued, right? There are companies that will value us and will pay us our worth, right? So hang in there and continue to press forward, continue to deliver excellence, right? Despite what you think, it's taken them a long time. She did, and it really paid off for her. She was even, that third promotion came because she interviewed outside the company while she was waiting for them, and they came forward after she gotten 2 raises and a promotion and 2 promotions, and they came back, the company came back for her, and that's where the 3rd promotion, they didn't want to lose her at this point, right? So they negotiated, she got another raise and another promotion. So hang in there, you know, let's do our part to make sure that we get rid of this very stubborn pay gap in this country, right? Let's cozy up to the N word. We can't get there without negotiating. It would be nice if they would just pay us what we are due. It would be nice if they would just recognize the value we're bringing and say, you're doing a great job, I'm going to give you a raise. That would be nice. But sometimes it's not like that. Mm-hmm. We have to negotiate, all right? Yeah. We have to do that ask.
Thank you so much for that, Gail. I love that point that you were talking about, just especially in reference to understanding the value. Yes. Something I want to underscore and just really highlight is remembering that as personal brands at your organizations, you're never tied completely to a title or a position. Your brand and who you are and the value that you offer is transferable. It will go with you wherever you go. And so understanding that wherever you go, whether at your organization or someplace that does value you at that particular level, is completely in your right and completely in your agency to pursue. And so thank you so much for underpinning that point. I think that's really valuable to remember. I also want us to talk about, we talk about the how so much, but sometimes we have our heads down and we look up 10 years later and it's like, oh man, I forgot to negotiate. So can you talk about when, during the course of your career, or what are just some of the different trigger milestones that we need to keep in mind at? As you're answering this question, I would also like to invite anyone else in the audience who might have questions to start lining up as well. But we'll start with Candace. Can you let us know some of the triggers to keep in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a great time, especially if you're embedded in a company, you're not transitioning from one company to the next, is year end, right? You're wrapping up a current year, you're moving into the next year, you're thinking about your career aspirations. I think that's a great time to do so. Another time is when you're just having general conversations outside of performance reviews. Again, I sound like I'm being a dead horse, but I think it's really important to leverage those relationships with your mentors and your sponsors, right? You never know when that next opportunity is going to come up. So I think those times when you're having those conversations, that's when it's time to say, hey, I think I'm interested in this area. What do you know? Who can I meet? What projects do you know about that I can leverage and learn from? So sometimes it's year end, sometimes it's throughout the course of your year, but also it's during those conversations with mentors and sponsors that those can happen. And you never know who you can be connected with when you're having those conversations.
Thank you for that, Candace. I think that underscores something that I love so much, and I'm not sure that we understand the full importance of it. I know in our organization, we make sure to talk about the value of having double vision. Understanding that a lot of us have these secret plans that we are enacting, where it's the plan that we communicate to our peers of, oh yes, I want to go to this level or get to this organization, but in the back of our minds, we have something else that we're working on, another vision. And so even doing what you're talking about, keeping all of those priorities at the forefront and understanding that's the end goal that we're negotiating towards is great. Melanie, did you want to add to that as well?
The other thing I would just add on is to think about increased responsibility and scope materially, right? So just because you have been asked to take on an extra project or initiative or extra area of responsibility interimly, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a material change in your scope. It's a great time to sit down and talk about what that entails in terms of the complete package as well.
And Gail, I'd add, before we go to the Q&A, I'd like you to also respond to just the notion of knowing how to use the power of your no. So a lot of us in our organizations are overachievers, or we are the ones that get things done. And let's say someone comes to you with the bright idea, Gail, I have this great position for you. It's going to be a promotion, it's going to be a title bump, it's going to be a title increase, it's wonderful. However, it's not a position you actually want. And so promotion to them is not equating to promotion for you personally. Can you talk about how to walk away from scenarios like that?
I'd love to talk about the soft no. So the soft no is, I love that you thought about me for that position. I just appreciate you so much. Right? I can see why you thought about me, because you're probably thinking about X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? My calendar is already full. Right? But I do know someone else who might be great for that, right? So you fully appreciate that they've thought about you. And you might even say, let me think about that and get back to you tomorrow, right? And then you think about it and you're like, you know what, that's just not aligned with my values and where I want to go in this company. But I do know Sarah such and such in XYZ would love to have that kind of promotion, right? So you kind of like appreciate it, but no.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
We're going to start taking our questions. Can you let us know your name as well as your question?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. So I'm Ashley McCullum. I do M&A at Salesforce. So I started at Salesforce about 3 years ago. I know you guys just discussed that, your biggest negotiating point is when you're first entering into a role. That ship sailed for me. I failed that with flying colors. I was just happy to be there.
Right?
Got me. So when I started, I gave them a range. I said, I need you to start me. I know, I saw that. Yeah. So now I'm like, okay, now we're at the position where, okay, it's not negotiations. I think it's conversations. And it's conversations about compensation when you're doing your end of year review. I think I have a happy to be here personality, and I get nervous. My hands are sweating right now, and I'm also very happy to be here. What advice do you have for those of us that are kind of like in that middle position where we're just trying to have that meaningful conversation about, how your performance review is tied to your compensation and you're trying to ask for more, and when you're in a position where you really do deserve more?
Wants to take that one?
I'll take it. I'll take it. I'm happy to take it. So listen, M&A, mergers and acquisition, that's a hellified job, okay? You are doing so much in that job. So listen, I would recommend that you get ready before the end of the year, document, keep documentation of the value you're bringing to this company, right? Be prepared to have that conversation. Talk to your peers, the ones that you know, right? Do your research. What is this job commanding outside? Because if they bring somebody in from the outside, they're going to pay them what the market prevails, right? So you be armed with that information when you go in, right? And you can be happy to be here and still advocate for yourself, right? Because you're bringing hellified value. Mergers and acquisitions jobs are no joke. So to even be in that job means you're a hell of a sister. Yeah. So stand in your power and stand in your confidence. Your confidence will come from practicing and having done your research and stepping out on. Courage its root is in encouragement. Its root is in courage, and it means to borrow somebody else's courage, right? So let somebody encourage you, whether that be a coach, a mentor, someone that can encourage you through that negotiation and help you get past that block of, I don't really know how to advocate for myself. Have that conversation. You're not negotiating. You're having a conversation about your value. Is that easier?
Yes.
Can I also add, excuse me if I'm projecting, but you seem like the person who technically is probably already doing all of the roles and responsibilities of the position you're trying to get promoted to. And sometimes it's just building a very visual case of saying, this is the job description of what I want to walk into, this is what I'm already doing, and this is how it parallels. So technically, if you're already performing in that capacity, demonstrating, listen, I'm already here, I'm already at this level. At this point, you just need to up-level my title as well as my income. Yeah. And while, yes, you are very happy to be there, you would also be very happy elsewhere. Thank you for your question.
Hello, thank you so much for being here and for your great insight. My name is Danielle Holman. I have two quick questions. One, more job descriptions have pay ranges now, and so would you recommend that you start at the top? If the pay range, do you start your negotiation at the very top of the pay range because they've published that's what they're willing to pay for the role, or is that not the best strategy for negotiation? That's question one. And then question two, in a previous organization I worked at, there was a senior level black woman who was hired, and she got the reputation for being very difficult because of her negotiation. It trickled down throughout the organization that, oh, she's going to be really difficult because of how she came into the organization, and I felt that was really a disservice to the work that she could do. And she had to kind of really walk back from there. So what recommendations would you have? Like if you come in really strong with negotiations, how do you avoid being considered difficult? Because we all know that black women often are considered that way.
Oh, I'd like to take the gender likability penalty at the second question. Anybody want to take the first question?
I would say in terms of negotiating, it's really, I think we talked a lot about your preparation, what you're bringing to the table, and really being able to defend that. And then I just want to be clear, you're trying to defend getting a promotion or getting a negotiation internally, or?
So the first question about you're getting a new job, the pay range is within 20,000. If you argue at the very top of the 20,000 range that they say, would you suggest doing that?
So what I would say, and I had a similar situation where someone was about to be lowballed, and I did pull them to the side. This was well before my time with Toyota. I would always say that, again, you're talking about the skills that you're bringing to the table, but also say, I don't think you should limit yourself or put yourself in a box, but rather you should say something like, I am open to negotiation. Every company is gonna have their cap and gonna have, kind of the boundaries, but just always say that you're open to negotiation, and then you can kind of go back and forth as opposed to just kind of going at that top range or what have you. Even when you're filling out an application or things like that, don't ever, to the extent that you can, don't ever limit yourself by putting in any dollar amount. Say that you're open to negotiation. And I don't know if anyone would add to that.
I would just add, when you're talking about where should you start in the range, it's what do you want, right? So what is gonna make you happy? Oftentimes they advertise different ranges, et cetera, but really at the end of the day, what value are you bringing, and how then do you have that conversation from that framework? Because you're the one that has to live with it. So I just always start with like, what am I looking for? And again, if you understand the dynamics of the market and where your skill sets sit within that, then that should give you the confidence to ask for what you deserve.
Thank you.
So that second part of that question is about what is very documented as the gender likability penalty, right? We all have these very stubborn gender norms in America. Women are communal, nurturing, and amicable. Men are direct, and they can pursue jobs and blah, blah, blah. And when we act like men, even though our jobs require it, then we get penalized. And that's why it's called the gender likability penalty. It happens too, it's been documented by Lean In and McKinsey, that women get labeled for negotiating. But one curious fact about women in negotiating is when they're negotiating for their peers, they do a splendid job. Like if they're negotiating for the salary of their teams or something like that, then that's fine, and they don't penalize us for that. So one of the recommended strategies, and this, you don't have to do this. I've had young women tell me, I'm not doing that. Men don't have to do it, don't do it then. But one of the recommended strategies to overcome that gender likability penalty is to talk a lot when you're negotiating about what we've accomplished, what our team has accomplished this year, right? You're the leader of the team. A man would say, I accomplished this, right? But as women, because we have this stubborn gender likability penalty, you might want to consider that and how we approach a negotiation, right? So it's tough, it's always tougher, but you bring up a very good point. I hope that helped.
Thank you. Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Garner, and I was just wondering if you can share some tips and advice for young professionals that are looking to switch into the field that they actually want to be in, where they don't have any direct experience, but they may have relatable experience. And how do you go into the negotiation where you can't say, I've done X, Y, Z, and can, for that specific area that you're trying to get into, but you can do the job. You just don't have it on paper to say, I've already done this.
I can start. So on that one, I was in a position where I'm an engineer by degree, and I started off as an engineer. Then partway through my career, about 8 years in, I decided to be a customer service executive or professional. And so I believe there's transferable skills. So I want you to kind of open your mindset a little bit and embrace the fact that you have a set of skills, and it's about then how do you translate that and position that to fit what you're going after. So direct to direct. So there's, leadership, there's communication, there's different, get it done tactics and things that you've accomplished in your career. Just look at that and try to compare the transferability. And then the other thing I would keep in mind is oftentimes we see a checklist on a description and we can check 80% of the boxes and we say, oh, we're not qualified. I would question, are you really not qualified? And start to think through, because our male counterparts can have 10% of the boxes checked and be like, I'm good, right? So I would go and just cross-connect that and really challenge. I'm really big into your mindset because that's your biggest limitation. And then just take those skills, transfer them over, and then talk through the lens of what that role is requiring based on the things that you've done that can translate to the things they're looking for.
That's exactly so.
I would also say, I know you said you're coming from the lens of a young professional. I think it's consistent of understanding how to communicate that transferability at any single level. Exactly. Something that I would do is focus on your results. I would argue that if on a job description you can hit every mark, you're probably overqualified for the job. You've already done it, right? And so right now what you're doing is demonstrating, this is the results I've gotten in this area, and quite frankly, this is what I can get for you as well, but also this is what you're missing because I got this skill set that I'm now transferring over. So it's communicating, it's practicing communicating how you're doing that added value and how your nuance is setting you apart from everyone else's resume who's going to look identical.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bridget Cooksey, and my question is, how do you negotiate PTO vacations? So I've been on my job 20 years plus, and if I'm thinking about transitioning to a new company or something of like, you know, other than the company I'm in right now, I'm not going up just levels, but how would you begin that negotiation? I know what the salary is, and I know how to negotiate that, right? But companies have a set salary cap for people coming into their companies. So how do you negotiate? Want PTO? I got 5 weeks. I can't leave. I can't have less than 5 weeks. You know, so that's my question for you guys.
You know what, I'll just say very briefly that sometimes, you know, you have to make the ask. It doesn't hurt to make the ask. But I think we also have to be realistic that sometimes companies do have controls or they do have, right, their rules and regulations and policies and procedures around that. I'm thinking about a time when we were hiring an executive who was coming over. It was a brand new role, right? And he kind of came to us like, hey, I get X amount at this company, and I at least need this. We were willing to compromise a little bit because we knew we needed that skill. We knew we needed that role. So I would just say make the ask, but be prepared. It's almost like what we've been talking about all afternoon, right? Make the ask, be prepared for, you know, it might not be a one-for-one. It might not be exactly what you want. And then you have to decide, okay, is this job worth, you know, do I want the job more than I want this PTO or what have you? But just go in understanding that sometimes there's structure that can't be compromised completely, but just at least be upfront and willing to make the ask. Did you want to add?
After you make the ask, I mean, you know, you made the ask. They said, no, our structure doesn't. What else do you want? Do you want flex time? Do you need, you know, if you're not willing, a hybrid schedule, and you're not willing to work 8 to 5, maybe you want 4 10s, right? Think about what you really need, right? And if they say no, you don't have to make the decision right there. You're like, let me think about this, and I'll get back to you later on today, right? And then come back with can you do flex time, right?
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Deanna Bernard from TriNet. I'm a director of sales. I want to concur with what you said. Every single guy that I've hired has negotiated their salary, and every single woman, no, they have not negotiated at all.
All right, did you say that again, please?
Every single man that I've hired, regardless of demographics, has negotiated his salary. Every single woman has not. They've just taken the salary.
Are you hearing this?
We offer the same starting salary regardless of gender.
Hold on. A $5,000 raise, if you just ask for $5,000, if you invest $5,000 over the course of your 40-year career, that's $1 million in your retirement. Okay? So that is what we're walking. That's what we're leaving on the table when we walk away without negotiating.
But I do have a question, and it's because I have a son who's starting his career and his fiance, and I keep telling them you have to manage up. Not just your manager know what you need to do, but that manager's manager. So can you talk to the group about tools as far as managing up so that they know how to do that? Thank you.
Who wants to?
There's so many, that's a big question. So I'll just take one angle of it, which is I think it's important for you to think about the structure of the company, right? And so there's all kinds of opportunities, whether it's quarterly business reviews, whether there's skip level one-on-ones. I'll tell you that as a leader in the organization, it is very rare that someone skip level asks for my time. Wow. And when that happens, I jump like a kid in a candy store. I'm so excited because we want to spend our time that way. We enjoy spending our time having conversations about how to help someone navigate their career. But oftentimes, we don't get that question asked. That initiative isn't taken. So I would say to you, think about, are you asking for time with other leaders in the organization, developing those relationships, telling your story, right? And talking about the things that you're trying to aspire to achieve and understanding how they might have done that in their journey or what advice they may have to offer. So I think oftentimes it's just taking that initiative and asking for the time of someone to have that conversation.
What I would add to that is, I think the young lady already sat down. What I would add to that is just being prepared, right? You really want to tell your story. You want to make sure that you're asking for advice. But as we were even talking about negotiating, make sure that you're prepared in that conversation, that you're not just walking in there rambling and rattling. Because folks like that definitely have limited time, and in some cases, attention spans, right? So please make sure that you're prepared.
Hi, my name is Candace. Hi, Candace.
Hi, Candace.
I don't have a question. I have more of a call to action for everyone in the room because this was a game changer for me. So for so many years, I too have seen men come in and negotiate their salaries, and that's their first line of questioning. And what I noticed is that when I would go into rooms, I wouldn't be willing to negotiate. And I had a friend share with me real numbers with what she negotiated as far as her package, and she shared it with me. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm gonna just send you my offer letter. I went to the room and asked for this, and that's what I did. So I think some companies frown upon that because they want you to gatekeep it, but there's enough to go around. Share real numbers. Ever since that conversation has happened, I go in guns a-blazing on what I'm asking for.
Right now.
Share the information with your network. You don't have to share it with everyone, but with your tribe, tell them, this is what I was able to get. Because I got some things that I was told originally, you'll never be able to get that. So more of a call to action.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just underscore, I love that you shared that as well. I think it's so important, especially in the communities that you're in. I know even within our executive women's retreat communities, our women have been able to get those 60% increases, those 70% increases because they shared. They shared their offer letters. They shared the total packages. They said, this is what I asked for. This was my walk-away amount. I will not take anything less. And so I have to say snaps to that. That works.
Good afternoon. My name is Deanna Oliver. My question is around, how do you know when to walk away and when to stick it out? You're with the company, you prompt negotiation, you find that the outcome is unexpected or doesn't align with what you hoped for. Is it as simple as, well, I know my worth, so I'm out the door? No. Or is it similar to the person that you described, that they're going to focus on their work, achieve excellence, and hope for the best in that year time frame?
How do you know when to fold them? Right. And when is it time? I think one of the things when you're at a company and you really want to stay there, right? That's really where your heart is. It doesn't hurt to start to look around. It's very empowering, right? To go out on the market and see what other companies are willing to pay, or whether they're paying. It can actually be a negotiating tool, right? That's when you really find out what one of my clients from last year, she got her second raise this way. She left the company. But when she was leaving the company, she found someone who gave her a great offer. She got everything she wanted, which is very rare. She got everything she wanted. Her company said, oh, wait, don't go, right? We'll now pay you this month. And she found so much joy in her, no, thank you, right? But you can decide, right? You can then decide, do I really want to give them another chance? I've known people who stayed, right, at their companies and regretted it. I've known people who stayed and loved it. So you get to decide. It's your life. These are your values. As long as what my company was doing was aligned with my values and I felt joy in being there, maybe it might be worth it to stick it out. But it's rare that I'm going to find joy in a place that doesn't value me, right? I went to this one company and they said, oh, we'd like to offer you this. I said, because we really value you. I said, well, if you really value me, I'd like you to pay me this. Then I would feel valued, right? I need to feel that you value me, right? And so it's up to you, right? It's a personal decision on whether you stay or go. But all of the things to be considered is, am I valued here? Do I love it? Does it bring me joy, right? But I would still go out and get that other offer. I would just begin an investigation. You don't have to go, right? But it will make you feel empowered, that you're just not staying there and taking it, right? Anybody else got a better answer or another supplemental?
I was just thinking about what I shared about my story with my interview, right? It's really being true to yourself and knowing what your threshold is and, kind of, hey, do I want to stick it out or not? And just really being true to yourself. That's all I was thinking about.
I would also just say in the total spans of how you value yourself, in addition to the monetary, look at what you want in terms of access to particular people, access to particular titles, resources, trainings, look at everything and see what the total package is. The total package.
All the other things you can negotiate besides salary, right? Maybe you can't get that salary, but I gave you 12 things to negotiate besides salary. Right?
Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you very much.
And we are closing. We are at time. Thank you, everyone, for sticking it out with us.
Thank you.
We invite you all. Find us in the app. Come up, say hello. Thank you so much.
Connect to us on LinkedIn.
Connect on LinkedIn.
Oh, is it up?